name is Kelly and I run a clinic called The Natural Balance. And in my clinic we work with predominantly women who are suffering with hormonal imbalance, which can be anything to do from heavier irregular periods to PCOS, endometriosis, fertility issues and pregnancy. And we do a lot as well with gut health. And today we're going to be talking about the impact of gut health and what you're eating and how that impacts your menstrual cycle, because the two are so very much interlinked. We're going to be talking about period pain and why you get period pain, what you can do to improve period pain, the types of foods that you want to eat and the ones that you want to avoid. We're going to be talking about the period poos. Those are a thing. Why do you get the period poos? What can you do about them as well? Then we're going to be touching on bloating around your period, why you get bloated. Is there something else that you want to be looking out for if it's bloating to do with your period or whether it's bloating to do something going on with your gut? And then finally, we're going to be touching on how birth control impacts not only our menstrual cycle, but also how it has a big impact on our gut as well. So first things first, let's just talk a little bit about the gut and what the gut is. So the gut, obviously, I'm sure many of you heard, it's in the news all the time when we talk about the gut and the microbiome. But the gut really is the root of so many things that goes in the body. And it basically is from mouth to bum. It's the whole tract that goes through the body there. It's made up of trillions of bacteria, and these bacteria help us do so many things such as digest and absorb our food. It helps us synthesize vitamins and minerals. It can detoxify as well, because what comes in must go out. But also really, really importantly, 70%, up to 70% of our immune system is in our gut. So if our gut's not functioning properly, we're going to find that we're going to be getting more sick more often. We're not going to be detoxifying as well, which is going to have a big impact and knock-on effect on our hormones. Now, you may also have heard that the gut is called the second brain. It's, in a more scientific word, it's called the enteric nervous system. But the gut has technically hundreds of millions of neurons in. We have what's called a bit of a gut-brain axis. So there is a connection between the gut and our brain and vice versa. And that's because we've got so many neurons and that second nervous system in our gut. And, if you've ever heard or felt the gut feeling, that's because we have got a feeling and we've got nerve endings in there, which are informing our decisions that we make. The serotonin is made in the gut as well. Not all of it, but a lot of it is made in the gut. So it also has an impact on the peristalsis action in the gut of things moving through. So not only does serotonin, is it needed for, neurotransmitter production to make us feel good, and it's one of our happy hormones. But if it's not working and we're not digesting and absorbing enough nutrients to produce it in the gut, we're going to have problems not only in the digestive system, but also working backwards up towards the brain. You can get a lot of imbalances going on in the body if the gut isn't functioning properly. If the gut's not working, it's going to have a knock-on impact on the nervous system. As I was saying there, we have that gut-brain axis, the connection between the gut and the brain. It's going to have an impact on our reproductive system. And that's often because the reproductive system is our least essential system. And by that, I mean we don't need it to survive. Yes, we need it for, the human race to continue, but in itself, we don't need it. So we need our cardiovascular system, we need our heart to pump, we need our lungs to breathe, to keep us alive, but we don't need our reproductive system. So when we're under a lot of stress, what happens is that reproductive system can start to shut down a little bit. So either you miss periods, maybe you get irregular periods, they become longer, they become shorter, it just goes a little bit out of sync, and that's because of the stress levels that can be impacting the reproductive system there. So that's one of the big impacts it can have going on when we're not digesting and detoxifying and making the right hormones, and we're not clearing things through. We can have a big impact on the reproductive system as well because of the gut. Skin as well. So the skin, I see this so often in clinic, is women that come to me for acne, in particular acne in the cheeks here. That can be a big indicator. The gut isn't detoxifying properly because our skin is our biggest organ. So toxins will come back out through the skin if we're not able to excrete them properly. So skin, cheek issues is quite a big one as well, on the forehead there. And as you know, often hormonal acne that you get around the face and the jawline, the chin and the jawline, is again to do with hormonal imbalance. And if we're not detoxifying and excreting the hormones, we're going to find that we get more bacteria come up there and around that area. Sex hormones that we have, such as progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, they can directly communicate with the microorganisms in our gut. And they play a huge and really, really important role in the psychological roles of reproduction, but also cell regeneration, inflammation in the body, our metabolism, Immunity, as I said, a lot of that's in the gut, 70% of it, and our brain function. So whilst you might think of those sex hormones as sort of being in your nether regions, they are having a big impact directly in the gut, which will then also lead on to other areas of the body as well. So if we've got an imbalance in the gut and the gut's not functioning, it's not detoxifying, you're not going to the toilet regularly, and by that I mean at least once a day. Going to the toilet less than once a day would be classed as constipation, so you need to look into the reasons for that. But if you're going to the toilet less than once a day, this can start to lead on to more symptoms and diseases long term, because you're going to start to get bacterial imbalance. Now, often I see as well in my clinic is a lot of women that come to me with thrush or BV, which is bacterial vaginosis. And again, there's a big connection between that, because we have a bacterial microbiome in our vagina, but we also have one in our gut. So when one of them isn't working properly, it can, and then there's an overbalance or an overgrowth, in one area, it can have an impact on the other. We don't quite know how the bacteria are able to translocate between the microbiomes there, but they can do. And so usually I find, if someone's really suffering with a recurrent thrush, then we are looking again back at going what's on in the gut. But again, the gut can have an impact on pregnancy complications, adverse pregnancy outcomes, if there's certain bacteria present, polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis and cancer. So there's lots of things there that the gut really is connected with, which is why I always say it's such an important thing to look at when I start working with someone. Going back to the sex hormones that we talk about in the gut. So estrogen, as I'm sure many of you have heard of estrogen. Now, this is one of our hormones which is produced in the ovaries. It's detoxified by our liver, and then it's removed by the gut. And by that, I mean excreted, you poop it out. Now, if it's not removed effectively by the stools, this can lead to estrogen dominance, because what happens is the estrogen sits in the bowel for too long, especially when you're constipated, and it starts to recirculate. Or it's not able to be clung onto the stool properly to be excreted properly. Again, it can also recirculate. And when we have estrogen dominance, you might find there's things such as heavy and painful periods, bloating, again, PCOS is often a big one that starts to come up, PMS, mood swings. So we do really want to work on making that gut function work better to excrete estrogen properly. It can also make symptoms such as fibroids and endometriosis worse, because they can be very much connected with estrogen. Now, progesterone, this is another hormone that we have, another one of our sex hormones, and this is often elevated the week before your period. And what it can do is relax the large intestine. And when that large intestine is a little bit more relaxed, it's not functioning as well, you might find you're a little bit more bloated, you're a little bit more constipated, because it's not working as well as it needs to be. And so you find that you can get a little bit more backed up, which then means you can end up with a little bit more wind too. Now, during your period, when your estrogen levels rise and the progesterone declines, women also tend to find that they retain more water and get a little bit more bloated. I just wanted to touch on leaky gut, because leaky gut, we'll talk about this as well when we come to the contraceptive pill, but leaky gut is when the tight junctions of the gut intestinal lining are leaky. Now, if you can remember back to school, I don't know if this is a bad representation, but if you imagine that my fingers are the cells of your gut, you want the cells to be really squished, packed tightly together, so that nothing can get through. So food's coming through here into the intestine, the cells are here, and then the bloodstream's underneath. But what happens is in a leaky gut is the cells start to get a little bit gaps here, and foods, toxins, bacteria start to leak through into the bloodstream. And when this happens, you might find you're getting achy joints, bones, you're getting skin outbreaks, especially in the cheek. You might find that you're noticing rosacea, you're getting more food reactions. You might find, long-term, if you've had long-term leaky gut, it leads to things like autoimmune conditions, because if you're letting toxins land in the bloodstream where they shouldn't be, the body starts to attack them a little bit, and it starts like a foreign invader, and the body will start to attack itself. So what we don't want to do is have leaky gut when it's coming to our hormones and our menstrual cycle, because what can happen is if toxins and bacteria and excess hormones are leaking into the bloodstream where they shouldn't be, going to start to wreak havoc. And some of the symptoms that we're going to be talking about today, you're going to notice much more of. So let's go on to period pain, and why do we get period pain? Now, the medical term for period pain is dysmenorrhea, and it's normal to experience some little bit maybe of uterine contractions during your period. Our womb is actually contracting and relaxing throughout the month, but often we don't notice it. We notice it more when we're coming up to our period and the womb's contracting, the uterus is contracting, to really get the blood out. So a small level of pain might be expected. And if you're someone that really suffers with this pain, you might also find there's nausea, vomiting, fainting, headaches, fatigue can be some of the other symptoms that you might experience as well. Tiny little bit of pain could be normal. But if you're suffering with, say, like medium severe pain, and obviously everybody's pain thresholds are different, this is something that should not be happening. This is not a normal biological reaction to have, and it's not something that you should be experiencing every month as part of your period. Now, many women do. Many women come to my client. Many people I know suffer with severe period pains, and often you're just told, take a painkiller. You don't know what you can do about it. But there is a lot that you can do. Now, what happens is when your uterus is contracting, it can restrict the blood flow and the oxygen to the womb, which is causing you even more pain. So it's a bit of a catch-22. It's like the pain's going to get worse because the constrictions are harder and more painful because there's more blood that it's trying to squeeze out. And again, if you're ever someone that's suffering with heavy periods, this can also make it worse because you might find that then you've got even more blood flow, clots as well coming out through the period. Now, something that you always want to have a little look for, and something that I see quite often in my clinic with women, is those of you who have very heavy periods can also have very low iron or low ferritin as well, which is a storage form of iron. Now, iron acts like a vasoconstrictor. So it constricts blood vessels, which stems the flow of blood. But when you have a heavy period, you lose more blood, you lose more iron, which means you're going to have more of a heavy flow. And if it's not replenished each month, the iron, then you're going to find that you're sort of constantly getting worse and worse. So it's something that you definitely want to look into. Now, the two types of dysmenorrhea we have, there's primary dysmenorrhea, which is what we're going to focus on today. So there's no specific abnormality causing the pain. There's certain things that are causing it, but it's not down to something like secondary dysmenorrhea, which would be PCOS, endometriosis, and fibroids, which is something that obviously need to be looked at in much more depth to understand why you've got those symptoms, so why you've got that disease or illness, or what's going on with the body and how you can improve it. But the primary dysmenorrhea is what we're going to focus on today. When we talk about period pain, we can't talk about period pain without talking about prostaglandins. Now, prostaglandins are fatty acids that we have in the body, which have a hormone-like effect. Now, we need prostaglandins in the body, so they do many good things. They reduce inflammation, they help with abnormal blood clotting, and they help regulate our immune system. So they're the good ones. We do have prostaglandins that we want in the body. But at the same time, we can have what we call the bad prostaglandins. And then if you have an excess of these bad prostaglandins, it can increase your pain and the pain receptors. You might find that it raises your blood pressure, it's increasing the inflammation in the body, and it's lowering your immune function. So obviously we want the good ones, but we don't want the bad ones, because the bad ones are going to make our period pains a lot worse. And if you know that you've been tested for endometriosis and fibroids and PCOS and you're just told, oh, take a painkiller, then it could be that the prostaglandins are something that you want to have a little look into. Essential fatty acids, so basically fats that you get from oily fish and nuts and seeds and avocado and olive oil. These are the raw materials for prostaglandins. Now, I want you to imagine prostaglandins on train tracks. So we have omega-3 and omega-6. Now, you've probably heard of omega-3. Definitely you may not have heard of omega-6. But I want you to imagine if you put in the raw materials for the track to go down the omega-3 track, so by that I mean if you're eating oily fish, so salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardine, herring, walnuts, flax seeds, green leafy vegetables, pumpkin seeds, you're going to make sure that your omega-3 track is going to stay on that railway track and go down to the good prostaglandins. By eating those types of fats, you're only ever going to get good, healthy, anti-inflammatory omega-3s, which will lead to the good prostaglandins, the anti-inflammatory ones. But we also have the omega-6 track. Now, the omega-6 track can potentially have a bit of a double track in it. So if you're putting in the wrong types of foods in that omega-6 track, it may end up diverting from going down to the good prostaglandin to the more inflammatory prostaglandin, which is going to cause pain and high blood pressure. So like I said, just to remember, you can go down the omega-3 track and you're always going to stay on that omega-3 track. But if you want to go down the omega-6 track and try and convert the the healthy fats into the good prostaglandins, you might find this is being hijacked by certain foods, which are causing you much more pain during your period. And the biggest culprit for this is dairy. Cheese, yogurt, milk, ice cream, butter. Not only does dairy have hormones in, it's got hormones in to grow a baby cow, but the saturated fat content in the dairy can really shift your omega-6 track from going down to the good prostaglandin to the bad inflammatory one that causes pain. So not only dairy, but also saturated fat. Saturated fat is in meat, so a lot of animal products, and it has what's called arachidonic acid in, and arachidonic acid is what's going to shift this track to go down the wrong way. And we get this in red meat, but it's also actually highest in chicken and turkey. So if you're someone that has quite a heavy meat diet with a lot of dairy in it, you're probably going to find that you're getting a lot more pain around your period than if you were removing the saturated fats and the dairy from that. Now, it's not that I'm saying you need to go vegan or plant-based by any means, but what I'm saying is if you are suffering with this pain, then it's definitely something that you want to consider, because it's scientifically proven that these types of fats impact these pain receptors in these prostaglandins. So, even if you're someone that just has, a little bit of milk in your tea, well, how many cups of teas are you having a day? Because all of this will start to build up. Are you having, yogurt on your breakfast? Are you having butter when you're cooking? Are you having ice cream for a snack in the evening? Whatever it is, just have a little look at, or do a food diary and just see how much dairy you're putting into the diet, as well as how much arachidonic acid from animal products and animal meat products in particular that you're eating, and maybe start to try to reduce those to reduce the prostaglandins going down the wrong way down that omega-6 track. Inflammatory diet as well is really important, an anti-inflammatory diet, but the inflammatory foods are also going to increase the pain receptors. So things like alcohol, sugar, caffeine and processed foods are all going to make the pain worse. And I've seen this a lot with my clients, like even in just 1 month, just removing biscuits with tea has made a huge impact to some of my clients with really bad period pains, which I know sounds silly, but really if you're just building up a little bit of these inflammatory foods in the diet, when you're having tea or a coffee or some yogurt every day, you'll find that it's going to start to compound and you're going to get the symptoms are going to be worse. Trying to remove those inflammatory foods is going to be really important. Now, just a quick note there on calcium, because some people do worry, if I don't have dairy, am I going to be lacking in calcium? Absolutely not. You don't need calcium at all to come from dairy. You can get it just enough, as much as you need from green vegetables, broccoli, sprouts, and kale. Other pain triggers as well can be xenoestrogens, so things like pesticides, chemicals and beauty products, your cleaning products, if you're using harsh cleaning products, bleaches, your skincare, your hair products. You've got to think, when you start to compound all of these xenoestrogen, or these estrogen mimicking compounds in the products that you're spraying around you or putting on your skin, it starts to build up, and these build-ups will start to impact the estrogen detoxification, but also the estrogen levels. And as I said to you before, higher estrogen is going to cause more period pain, more bloating, more mood symptoms, and in more severe cases, things like PCOS, so you could be looking at what's going on with endometriosis and fibroids. We don't want to be having estrogen dominance in the diet. So I encourage you to look at the Yucca app, which is YUKA. I used to use this a lot with my clients, to just have a look at what products you're using, the levels of hormones and xenoestrogens and things that are in there that are not good for the body, and then start to work back about how you can reduce that toxic load. It's a very, very big important one for fertility as well. So just a little recap then. To reduce the period pain, remember, painkillers aren't going to fix this. They're just going to temporarily mask it. And as I know from a lot of clients that I see, painkillers don't actually fix the problem anyways, because the pain can be so severe. But you want to work on a hormone balancing diet, which is 8 to 10 fruits and vegetables a day, eating whole grains, oily fish, your salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardine, herring, your nuts and seeds, your avocado, your olive oil. Very, very anti-inflammatory diet, so lots of brightly coloured fruits and vegetables. The more colour you can get, the better. B vitamins as well, so B vitamins from your leafy greens, so cabbage, spinach, Swiss chard, those types of greens. Magnesium salt baths are great as well because magnesium's a real big relaxant in the body. So if you can get magnesium salt bath in there a couple of times a week, especially around your period, that's really going to help transdermally absorb that magnesium for you to relax the muscles and obviously the contractions going on in there in the uterus. Zinc is a great one as well from lots of green leafy vegetables. And exercise, exercise is going to help increase your endorphins. Endorphins are going to act a bit like an opioid, which acts like a pain reliever. So, if you can do gentle exercise, that's really going to help with period pains too. You could look at herbal teas, and always, encourage you to use fresh tea rather than a bag tea because you're going to get a lot more potent herb from it. So peppermint, ginger and chamomile are really good ones. And obviously reducing your processed foods is going to be so important. So anything that's long life, and I always say to people, if you can't read the ingredients, then you don't understand them, then you don't want to be putting that in there. So on to point 2, which is why do we get the period poos? So period poos, I want to go back here to the prostaglandins, which I've talked a lot about with the pain. Again, these fatty tissues that act a little bit like hormones. Now, the prostaglandins can cause uterine contractions, as we were talking about, and they can be painful, but can also increase gut motility. And by that, I mean the speed that things are moving through the gut. And if they speed up the bowel movements, it can cause loose stools. And what happens is if you've got loose stools, and especially, notice around your periods, what's happened is that the stool isn't able to be digested and absorbed the nutrients from it long enough in the stool, and water is reabsorbed in the large bowel. And so what happens is if things are in there and they're not staying there long enough, they're going to come out when they're not ready to come out, which is why we end up with loose stools. And we find that we've got, we haven't digested and absorbed the food we need. So prostaglandins can really be the culprit for that. But to increase the omega-3 again is going to be good because that's our anti-inflammatory prostaglandin pathway that we want. So flaxseed oil is a great one, but flaxseed oil, and with flax seeds, you really want to keep them in the fridge or the freezer because the fats in them are so susceptible to going to rancid quickly. But on the other side of the period poos is you might get constipated. So progesterone is often responsible for this, and that's because progesterone is responsible for the growth and thickening of the uterine walls. And it really peaks right before we ovulate, so usually around day 21. And the build-up of this hormone can cause constipation. So the important thing to do is to make sure that we can get the bowels moving. So the important thing for that is hydration, so 2 litres of water a day. And I always caveat that with herbal tea counts towards water hydration, but caffeine doesn't. It actually is a diuretic, so it increases water loss. So you want to make sure you're getting enough hydration. Fruits and vegetables. Fiber is essential, so 8 to 10 a day is really what you're aiming for. So you maybe 2 fruits with breakfast, 3 to 4 vegetables with lunch and dinner is what you want to go for, which isn't that hard to do. If you have a stir fry or if you have roasted vegetables, you can really get a bit mix of that in there, along with your complex carbohydrates such as oats, sweet potato, grains, lentils, beans. That's what's going to help move the bowels through. So really make sure that you're eating enough fiber, that you're chewing your food well, that you're hydrated, and that you're mindful eating when you eat. Because if you miss that visual clue that the food's coming, then the food's going to basically, it's like putting food into an oven cold. You wouldn't do it. You need the food and the stomach to be warmed up with the digestive juices in order for that process to work. So then why do we get the bloating around our period? Now, this is often one people ask me all the time. Why do we get bloated? It's very annoying. Absolutely it is. And often that's due to an increase in our hormones. So particularly estrogen and prostaglandins, again, this can cause bloating. The drop in progesterone that we have and the rise in estrogen can cause water retention and bloating. When we have that excess estrogen in the body, this can cause the body to retain more water and more salt. Now, I always remember from my studies where it says, where the sodium goes, the water flows. So by that, it means if your body's retaining more salt or sodium, it's going to increase the water retention as well. So the cells are going to become more swollen, it's going to cause you to be more bloated, and that feeling of sort of water retention that you get around your period. Now, you might think that these symptoms are happening in your stomach, but they're more likely happening a little bit further down in your uterus. So again, the important things to keep the bloating down is that you're going to the toilet regularly, because if you're constipated, again, that's going to add to the bloating. But also you want to make sure that you are detoxifying your hormones, especially the estrogen, through the right types of foods. If you are really struggling, you could also try 1 to 2 tablespoons of chia seed or flaxseed and just soak it in water for half an hour and then drink that, and do that every day because it's quite a mucilaginous consistency, can help to really move things through the bowel. Now, what I would say though is you want to, again, reducing your dairy and your meat if you're finding that you are really bloated, but also the soya milk, because if you're having soya milk, you always want to make sure that it's organic, because soy is the most genetically modified food on the planet. So you want to go for organic where you can. But if we have an excess of estrogen, we're going to have, because we're not detoxifying it properly and we're not excreting it out in the body when we poop, essentially, we're going to find that it starts to recirculate, and estrogen dominance, as we've talked about before, causes bloating, PMS, breast tenderness, painful periods, all of those things that we talked about at the beginning. So in order to try and manage that and to make sure that you're going to the toilet regularly, but also specifically detoxing that estrogen to help try and reduce the water retention, make sure that the salt is and the sodium is being excreted properly, is increasing your cruciferous vegetables. Now, cruciferous vegetables are so incredible for the liver, for the detoxification, and obviously estrogen. So making sure that you're getting things like cauliflower, broccoli, Swiss chard, sprouts, kale, those types of vegetables are really good for detoxification. And I would say if you go for like a fistful each day, is going to really, really help with the detoxification. If you're bloated regularly, and in particular if it ties in with smelly gas, so maybe it smells a bit like sulfury or methane-y, if you're either constipated or you've got loose stools, maybe you've got belching and burping, reflux, coupled with this bloating, the likelihood is that you've got some sort of bacterial imbalance or maybe an infection. And usually this is going to be triggered from a travel bug, antibiotics, food poisoning incident that's just not been repaired. Then we're going to come on to birth control and the pill. Now, I don't want you to think that I'm pill bashing by any means, because I'm sure many of you are on the contraceptive pill. I was on the contraceptive pill myself for about 17 years. I wish I hadn't gone on it for that long because of the symptoms that I had when I came off it, and we see a lot of this in my clinic. People that come off the pill and have post-pill syndrome. But I just want to make you aware, if you are on the pill or if you're thinking about going on the pill, how this can impact the gut and how this can obviously then impact your hormones and everything else that we've been talking about today. Now, birth control can cause intestinal hyperpermeability, which is that leaky gut, which I've been talking about. And obviously, the longer that you've been on birth control, and I'm not saying you take it 1 month and you're suddenly going to have leaky gut, but usually people are on birth control for months and years. The longer you're on birth control, the more you're going to have an increase in this intestinal permeability, leaky gut. But it's also going to start to really play with the bacterial balance of your gut, so the good bacteria and the bad bacteria. And as I said at the beginning, our gut's made up of this microbiome, and if it's starting to become imbalanced because we're on the contraceptive pill, we're going to find that other things start to happen to us. So like I said, you might be more bloated, you might find that you're getting gas, that you're getting constipation, that you're getting loose stools. And often a big one that I see between the two of this is thrush, which is a candida overgrowth. And as I said before, we have the vaginal microbiome, we have the gut microbiome, we also have the oral microbiome, and the bacteria can translocate between places. So if we're causing leaky gut from taking the pill for years, which is then causing bacterial imbalance in the gut, which is then meaning we're having a candida overgrowth, can then mean that we're starting to get thrush as well, or BV. And I usually find that as I start to improve the gut, because I always start with working on the gut, as I start to improve the gut health, people often find that their thrush and BV starts to just naturally go away because we've improved all areas of the microbiome there. So they absolutely can be connected. Bloating, thrush, and IBS can be connected to the pill. Then also the gallbladder. Now, you may not know about the gallbladder or where it is, but it's a little organ that we have up here which excretes bile, and we need bile to emulsify fats when we eat them, and it squirts into the digestive tract. And you need bile as well to properly excrete estrogen. And when we're not properly excreting estrogen, it's going to have an impact on our hormonal balance. So birth control can really impact this. So we want to make sure that either, if you're coming off the birth control, that you're supporting the body and the digestive tract as well as you can, so that you're able to excrete the estrogen through eating the cruciferous vegetables, the anti-inflammatory diet, reducing the dairy and the meat products to help your body have that little bit of a kickstart on a supportive way to digest and excrete the hormone excess. Because obviously when you're on the pill, you're going to be pumping in extra hormones to the body anyway. So you need even more detoxification for that process to not alter periods and the digestive tract as well. Another interesting fact here is that birth control can also have an impact on your thyroid function. Now, thyroid function is important because it governs the metabolism of every cell in our body, but if it's not, thyroid has a big impact, especially in women with PCOS. So if birth control can alter your thyroid function, which can also have an impact on the gallbladder. So you don't really want to be messing with the gallbladder and the thyroid, because the thyroid governs our metabolism as well. So that's why some people, maybe they're putting on more weight during the pill, some are losing it, some are finding that their energy levels change, and that's because the thyroid manages all of these things to like energy and metabolism. Now you might thinking, okay, how do I know if I'm having an issue with the gallbladder here and if your bile's working and flowing properly? Well, again, you might find that you're reacting to fatty foods, you're rushing to the loo after you've eaten something fatty, you might get bloated or nausea after eating fatty foods if you feel a little bit sick that you can't digest them properly. That would be a sign that there's something going on with the function of the gallbladder and the bile. The oral contraceptive pill also depletes B vitamins, so in particular B6, B9 and B12. And these vitamins we need to make our red blood cells. And our red blood cells is what transports oxygen around. It contains iron. And as I said to you, iron is what is a vasoconstrictor. It stems the blood flow as well as periods. So when you find that you come off the pill and maybe your hormones are starting to go a little bit crazy because your body's not able to just excrete the estrogen properly that has been pumped in, and sometimes progesterone as well, depending on what you're on, that you're finding that your periods are either irregular, they become heavy again, they become non-existent, because it can have such an impact on what's going on with that whole cycle there. It can also impact your mood, cognition and your immune system. As I'm sure many of you know, often, you don't tend to stay on one pill. Many people do. You can stay on one pill forever, but often I find, a lot of people in my clinic, they come and they've swapped to a million different pills because they're trying to find the right one that doesn't impact their mood, that doesn't impact their weight, doesn't impact how they feel. So we know that the pill can have a big impact on all of that. So like I said, it's not that I'm trying to shame you if you're taking the contraceptive pill. I just want you to make aware of some of the things that can be happening, going on with that whole cycle there. It can also impact your mood, cognition and your immune system. As I'm sure many of you know, often, you don't tend to stay on one pill. Many people do. You can stay on one pill forever, but often I find, a lot of people in my clinic, they come and they've swapped to a million different pills because they're trying to find the right one that doesn't impact their mood, that doesn't impact their weight, doesn't impact how they feel. So we know that the pill can have a big impact on all of that. So like I said, it's not that I'm trying to shame you if you're taking the contraceptive pill. I just want you to make aware of some of the things that can be happening. So I hope that has helped. That has been like the whirlwind, how gut health is related to period poos, period pains, bloating and the contraceptive pill. So I really hope that has helped you. Please do feel free to watch the video back again and do reach out to me if you have any questions. My name is Kelly and you can find me on The Natural Balance with an _ at the end on Instagram. I would love to hear from you. I'd love to know what you thought of the video and I hope to hear from you soon.